I want to start with some credit, and the credit for the program goes to the Bollens-Ries-Hoffenberg Lecture Committee, and special thanks to all the outstanding UCLA staff who do the hard work, as always, of bringing these events together. Please keep an eye out for all the great events going on across the university these days, and also please consider supporting all of the wonderful and innovative teaching and research being done in the Department of Political Science and across the campus. Established in 1985, as the Bollens-Ries Lecture, the series honors John Bollens and John Charles Ries, both professors in the Political Science Department. Known as Jack and Chuck, Bollens and Ries educated and mentored generations of students who went on to careers in public service in Los Angeles, Sacramento, and beyond. In 1991, the name of Professor Marvin Hoffenberg, one of the lecture's founders and counsels, was added to its list of honorees. Bollens and Ries died too young, Jack in 1984 and Chuck in 1987. And we lost Marv in 2012, and Betty, his wife, in 2013. Their son, Peter, has continued to champion our department through the Sidney Stern Memorial Trust, and he's now a member of the lecture's Honorary Advisory Committee. With us tonight, we're very happy to have several members of the Bollens and Ries families, including Jack Bollens' sons, Scott and Ross, and Chuck Ries's wife, Rita, his daughter, Mary, and his son Jim. I want to give special recognition tonight to Ross Bollens, who spent much of his career, I should say, at UCLA, providing computer and cybersecurity for UCLA's administrative operations. So Ross is retiring this year, and I just ask everybody to join me in thanking him for his service to the university. But thank you to all the family members for being here. We're honored by your presence and to have you as part of our political science and UCLA family. We're also handing out note cards. I think you probably received one on the way in, and pencils. And those are for you to write down questions that you might have for the questions and answer period. So at the end of the lecture, we'll collect those cards and we'll pose those questions to the supervisor at that time. It's now my pleasure to kick off tonight's program by introducing John Karagosian, one of the lecture's founders and the chair of the Bollens-Ries-Hoffenberg Lecture Committee, who will introduce tonight's speaker. John earned his BA in political science from UCLA. I won't say exactly when John was at UCLA, but I'll give you a clue by noting that John could have been standing on this exact spot the last time a sitting president fired a high-ranking investigator looking into his campaign. John was a student of Jack Bollens, and actually Jack was instrumental in getting John his first job on the staff of Ed Edelman. John worked for Ed in City Council and then on the County Board of Supervisors, deferring his admission to law school for several years. John finally went on to earn his JD at Harvard Law School, and after law school, he worked as a trial attorney for the Justice Department and in private practice in Washington, D.C., before returning to Los Angeles, where he was in private practice before joining Sunkist, where he's currently vice president and general counsel, again, for Sunkist growers in Valencia. Thank you, John, for all that you do for the Bollens-Ries-Hoffenberg Lecture in the department, and please welcome John.
Thank you, Jeff. This lecture series began 30 years ago, and our lecturers have included Vice President Walter Mondale, 3 California governors, and best-selling author Malcolm Gladwell. The series was founded and chaired by former City Council Representative and County Supervisor Ed Edelman. As you may know, this past fall, Ed died, and tonight's lecture is the first one without him. Let us thank Ed for the past 30 years and for tonight. Tonight's lecturer is Los Angeles County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, who continues the lecture's outstanding tradition. A word about Los Angeles County. It is the most populous local government in the nation, with over 10 million people. As some perspective, the total population in the United States after at the 1820 census, after the Louisiana Purchase, was smaller than Los Angeles County is now. Los Angeles County is governed by a 5-member Board of Supervisors and by no one else. No elected executive, no other legislative house, just 5 supervisors, each of whom represents over 2 million constituents. Supervisor Kuehl was elected to the board's 3rd supervisorial district in 2014. The 3rd district includes UCLA, from which the supervisor had graduated. Indeed, for the past 43 years, the 3rd district has been represented by a UCLA graduate. We'll have to forgive the supervisor for diluting her UCLA pedigree by also graduating from Harvard Law School. To list all of Sheila Kuehl's accomplishments would take a week, but I've managed to boil it down to just a couple of hours. That's a joke. While attending UCLA, Sheila maintained her successful television acting career, especially her featured role in the 1960s sitcom The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. After graduating from UCLA, she continued acting and later became a UCLA Associate Dean with an office right here in Kirkhoff Hall. She then attended Harvard Law School, where she won the school's prestigious moot court competition, was elected class marshal, and later served on the nationally known, indeed worldwide known, Board of Overseers for Harvard University. After practicing law here in Los Angeles, teaching at Loyola and USC law schools, and leading women's and other community organizations, Sheila was elected to the state assembly. She was the first woman to be selected as Speaker Pro Tem. She chaired the Assembly Judiciary Committee and authored numerous laws to protect families, health care, domestic violence victims, housing, and the LGBT community. She also spoke at 2 national Democratic conventions. She was then elected to the state Senate, where she chaired the Senate Health Committee and the Senate Natural Resources Committee. In her 14 years in the legislature, Sheila was honored as Legislator of the Year, as Legislator with the Most Integrity, and on and on and on numerous times. Incredibly, and this has got to be a record, she authored 171 bills that were enacted into law. After her retirement from the legislature, Sheila founded Santa Monica College's Public Policy Institute, lectured at UCLA's Law School, and was a distinguished policy fellow at UCLA's Luskin School of Public Affairs. Since being elected to the Board of Supervisors in 2014, Sheila has continued to support the environment, to support families, to support civil rights, authoring county legislation, and working with the county's sprawling bureaucracy. She also serves on LA's Metropolitan Transportation Agency and the South Coast Air Quality Management District. In sum, Sheila has been an inspired and inspiring advocate whose career in public service has benefited literally millions of people. Truly, she is one of the outstanding people of our community. And by community, I do not just mean the Los Angeles community, and I do not just mean the California community. Sheila is one of the outstanding people of our national community. The Bollens-Ries-Hoffenberg Lecture is honored to have as this year's lecturer, Sheila Kuehl.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you for that great welcome. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Thank you for being here. It is a great pleasure and an honor to be invited to give this lecture. I want to thank the families so engaged in beginning it and supporting it. The memory of Ed Edelman, and I'd like to dedicate my remarks tonight. They'll be inadequate for to honor him really, but at least to Ed's work, his family, and his legacy and memory. So in thinking about what to talk about tonight, I mean, I'm sort of a natural comedian, and I thought, no, I don't want to do that because this is kind of a serious lecture, not boring, but serious. And I've been thinking, as we all have in the past several months, if not for decades before, about governments. I've now been in the state government of California, 2 different houses, as you heard, and now in the county government. So thinking about how those governments impact each other seemed to me to be an area that not many people really thought about very much. What the overlap might be, what the opportunities might be, what the conflicts might be. So I decided to take that as my theme for the remarks tonight. But let me say 2 things about the remarks when they're over. One is, whatever questions you want to ask do not need to necessarily be related to the remarks if you have curiosities about other things. The second is my apologies for my inability to stay for the reception because they've scheduled a conference call. Not all 5 of us, because of course that would violate the Brown Act, but 2 of us with some staff because the state budget is getting decided and we're hearing a little bit about it tonight. So I have to go jump in the car and join a conference call while I'm driving home. But back to this theme, too many governments. Instead of a colon, there might have been a question mark. Are there too many governments? And what the heck are they? What do they have to do with each other? So let me start with a phrase that I saw. I have absolutely no idea who said it, but here it is. Art removes boundaries and makes the world brighter. It is a common language for people all over the world. Politics are the opposite completely. Politicians, their very meaning is based on the lines they draw. So I take as my theme those lines. Why do we draw lines? There must be a number of answers, but let me start by saying the kinds of lines that we draw in government. Start out with the lines we draw and call them laws. Think about laws and how we are, if their laws are to be constitutional, they have to be somewhat predictable in terms of what they're telling us to do or telling us not to do. Otherwise, we haven't had sufficient specificity, and something might be ruled unconstitutional for vagueness because the lines are not clear. Take, for example, a crime. How will I know whether you've committed first-degree murder or second-degree murder? Hopefully neither of those things in this group, but it's because we draw lines in the definition of what these laws must be. It's the same with benefits. What is an impoverished person in America? We talk about the poor, but in order to give benefits or allocate benefits to the poor, government draws lines. They say if you make, I'm going to make up a number, $12,573 a year, you are, anything below that, you are poor. That means you qualify for benefits that we might give to poor people. If you make $12,576, you are no longer poor because we had to draw a line. I'm not saying we. In this case, generally the federal government, augmented by the state. Why do we do that? Because if we're going to give benefits because someone is in a particular class or group. We have to define that class or group. Otherwise, how do we know how to allocate our tax money? How do we know how to allocate those benefits? So we define poverty, but we also must define the benefits. Am I giving you, for instance, a subsidy so that you can live affordably in an apartment? What percentage of your income am I going to require you to pay in order to be in an affordable apartment when you can't pay the whole rent and I'm going to subsidize it? How far will I go to subsidize it? It's all lines. So to say that politicians thrive or only exist because of lines, it's not just about the lines around my district. It's about the lines in every single thing that I do every day, where I must decide you're either in or out. You are either going to get affordable housing or you're making too much to get affordable housing. You are going to get health treatment or you're not sick enough or you're making too much, or some line will either move you in or out. And those are the kinds of decisions that governments are called upon to make every day, whether they're international, national, state, or local. You may have to trim the tree in front of your house, but only if it's encroaching on the sidewalk by 6.3 inches. Do you know what I mean? Some of it seems silly, but there has to be some definition. Otherwise you say, why do I have to trim my tree? And he doesn't. What's the answer? Lines. It's lines. We draw lines in these kinds of situations about benefits, about rules, about laws. Then there are the kind of lines that you think about when I talk about these different kinds of governments. We call them jurisdictions. Are you in my jurisdiction? Do you know? How many of you know that you live in the 3rd district? How many of you aren't quite sure if you live in the 3rd district? Oh, come on. I just know there's some of you. You may know that you live in other districts. I was walking in the Santa Monica promenade the other night, and a couple was coming towards me, and the gentleman said to his wife, "Look, Marge, there's our little Congress member." Which could be, well, these days probably not a compliment, but not so bad. So when we talk about jurisdiction, first of all, we talk about an area, a physical area. There is such a thing as Los Angeles County. Now, Los Angeles County, how do we know it has 10 million people in it? Because they are 10 million inside a line. That line is the boundary of the county, where it butts into Ventura County, or Orange County, San Bernardino County, Riverside County. There's all kinds of counties, 58 of them in the state. But LA is very different. If Los Angeles County were a state, it would be the 8th largest state. And let me put it another way. 1 out of every 35 Americans lives in LA County. 10 million, 350 million, 1 out of 35. And that is kind of a stunning thing because 1 out of 35 doesn't seem like it's such a small number. I mean, that's like a lot of people living here. We should be able to control a lot more than we do of what's going on in the country. Oh well, that would be another story. Jurisdiction is, though, not just about territory, because you actually probably live in the United States, State of California, County of Los Angeles, City of something or other, LA, Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, Pasadena, Culver City, wherever. And so all of those jurisdictions overlap. If you were looking at Google from the air, and you could lay those jurisdictions one over another, you couldn't even see your house because there's so many overlapping jurisdictions. So what do they do, and why do we have all those different kinds of governments? Each of them has different responsibilities. The federal government, I'm sure you know because that's the one you study in school, has global responsibilities. It also has national responsibilities for very broad policies and lots of funding, which goes up and down depending on who's back there. And decisions are made and lines drawn about where that funding is going to go, how those policies affect certain populations, et cetera. And we all live under certain kinds of federal laws here. And they overlap in other ways as well. For instance, if you're on the South Coast Air Quality Management District, you can say something about the air quality emitted by vehicles at the airport. You cannot say anything about the air quality emitted by the airplanes at the airport. Why is that? Federal jurisdiction. So there it overlaps as well, not to mention the oil and gas that's under the airport. I won't talk about that after Aliso Canyon because I'll scare you to death the next time you take a flight. So the federal government has certain jurisdiction over your life, where you live, where you work. Some of the laws about, let's say, discrimination are federal laws. Some of the laws about labor are federal laws. Many of the laws about health care are federal laws. We've heard a lot about the Affordable Care Act, which other people called Obamacare. That was a federal enactment. And it affected all the states and all the people in the states. But there are certain federal laws that are left to the states to figure out, to adopt if they wish or not, to expand. They cannot contract. If the federal law sets a certain level, you can't go below that level, but you can go above that level. So in the environment, for instance, where the federal law says, we don't care about your air quality, they can spew 100 million, units of gunk. That's an official word for it. The state of California can say, no, no, no. They can only spew 1 million units of gunk. And that is the limit that we will put on it. So there are ways in which these jurisdictions overlap, but separately draw a number of lines and say different things. It is a very interesting thing, though, that when the federal government sets a rule, for the most part, if they have set it, you are not really allowed to do less. You are only allowed to do more or require more, etc. That can also be true in whether or not the state even decides to do something. Remember, the Medi-Cal or Medicaid expansion that was a part of the ACA was not required in the states. The states had to vote in their legislatures whether or not to adopt that expansion. And if they adopted the expansion, the federal government actually paid quite a hefty percentage of the subsidies that went for poor people's health insurance. So in the state of California, you've been reading a lot about how California is such a weird place these days compared to the rest of the country. The reason for that is California has its own state legislature, and I know you know that. There are 80 people in the state assembly, each of them representing about 500,000 people, and there are 40 people in the state senate, each of them representing about 1 million people. They each have to pass something and send it to the governor to be signed in order for it to become law. And it's the same, really, with budgets. It's the same with environmental standards. It's the same with standards about benefits that go to poor people. It's the same with health care. The state has jurisdiction over almost everything that you think of as things that government does. So what does the county do? County, I think, is the most mysterious level of government to everybody because it is thought of pretty much the way we think about a city. People say to me, do you trim trees? Do you fix potholes? Do you do land use planning? And the answer is, well, yes and no. The county has about 1 million people who live in unincorporated areas, that is, areas that are not in some city. So where you live in an unincorporated area, that area, we're your city government. And if you live in a city, the city is your city government. What the county essentially is is the final arm of the state, and to some extent the final arm of the federal government. The county actually operates hospitals. The county actually operates health clinics, mental health services, public health services, substance abuse treatment, the whole transportation system, the metro, jails, not prisons. Prisons are state, but we have our sheriff and we have our jails. We operate the foster care system. We are the final place where the homeless get help. The state says, here's some money, go help the homeless. The county says, thank you very much, and now we'll help the homeless. But it wasn't enough money, which is my way of thanking you very much for voting for Triple H in the city of LA and Measure H in the county to bring in some money so we actually can help the 47,000 people who are at the moment homeless. But we have to do a lot more. So the county also does affordable housing. The county also does environmental regulation. A lot of what we do is to provide the services that are funded and ordered, essentially, by the feds and by the state. So what happens then with the overlap? When I was running, a lot of you, and there are some familiar faces here, a lot of you heard me talk about silos in the county and how I wanted to break down silos. Let me tell you what those silos kind of were like and what it means. In the county, we run our county government by departments. The 5 of us make a decision, sometimes just 3 of us, because it's like that's the majority on a board of 5. Just think about it. You just need 2 other votes and you can spend $30 billion. Beats the hell out of state government, I say. I mean, totally. So we have departments that essentially deliver the services, carry out the policy that we set. So we had a Department of Public Health, a Department of Mental Health, a Department of Health. And I don't know about you, but when I think about health, I think about all 3 of those things for me. Do I have a substance abuse issue? Oh, that's over in public health. Do I have a mental health issue? In mental health. Do I need to go see a doctor? That was in the health department. And as little as 6 years ago, you'd have to sign up in 3 different systems with the county in order to go to each one of those areas. So one of the things that we did the first year after I was there was we established a health agency, and we brought the 3 departments into a health agency. And that means they share IT, they share office space to some extent, getting better, but it's not just co-location. It really had to do with starting a program called whole person health, because you're one person. You have a mental health issue, a health issue, substance abuse issue, public health issue, etc. So busting down silos in the county meant, in one way, putting these departments into a health agency. In another way, it meant there had to be some collaboration. We had a Blue Ribbon Commission on Children. The Blue Ribbon Commission on Children made a lot of recommendations. Sometimes the recommendations ended up on the shelf somewhere. In our case, they did not. And the major recommendation that they made, though it wasn't the only one, was that there ought to be an Office of Child Protection. Okay, so we have a Department of Children and Family Services. They actually work with our foster children, all the way from age 0 to age 26. Where does the Office for Child Protection go? Well, if we put it in the Department of Children and Family Services, essentially we haven't broken any silos down. We've said, this is the only place where we want any caring about children. We're going to put it right here, and you're the only people that have to care about children. But instead, we decided to start something that's kind of run amok a little bit in the county. I call it the ADHocracy. The ADHocracy, things that you invent when it's not just one department that cares about these things. Mental health had a whole area to worry about children's mental health. Did they interface with the Department of Children and Family Services? Often they did not. they had good programs, but they did not necessarily blend. So in the Office of Child Protection, we located it in the CEO's area. And that was our way of saying every department must work with this group. We did the same thing with our homelessness initiative. The homelessness initiative is located independently in the CEO's office. The new Women and Girls Initiative that we're just starting in the county is located in the CEO's area. That is a signal that we want all departments to talk about these things together. When we started trying to deal with children who had been sexually exploited, with trafficking, sex trafficking of children, and that is a very big part of what was happening, we needed probation, the Department of Child and Family Services, mental health, our public health. All of these areas had a piece of what needed to happen with these girls. And it was mostly girls, not only, but mostly. So again, CSEC, we started a consortium so that one part of our government would talk to the other part of our government. I know that seems to you like, why didn't this happen before? But, you know, it's easy to say and difficult to do, and not because of reluctance or bureaucracy, because of tradition. Because when something exists, and you know in your own families about tradition, about things that remain the same, because that's the way we've always done them. And you know what it takes when you push back against that. And so we've been pushing in the county. So what happens then? The federal government may tell us to do something. The state government may tell us to do something. We may have a different idea. So what we've been trying to do is to create partnerships, to create consortia, to create collaborations with federal entities, with representatives from the federal entities. We need HUD in order to build housing, not just their money, but they've got rules, and their rules can get in our way. But there are other ways in which collaboration is a good thing. Sometimes collaboration is not such a good thing. Well, I guess I would say even sometimes democracy may seem very messy. Actually, it is the most messy form of government, I think. We believe in it, but when you participate in democracy, sometimes you go home and go, why did I go to that? You know, I'll give you an example. Measure H, wonderful measure to bring it, by which all of us said, okay, I'll pay a little bit more in sales tax in order to provide services for homeless families and individuals. But we thought, well, it was probably very important to build into Measure H an oversight committee that would make the decision about how that money would be allocated. Because in our homeless initiative, we have 47 different parts to the initiative, all the way from prevention, financial empowerment, affordable housing, through the services that we give homeless people, and then follow-up to keep them in housing that we put them in. So we thought it would be a good idea to have a group that would help figure out where the money went. Unfortunately, the way we constructed the group in Measure H, there were 50 people on it. So 50 people get together in a room to try to decide how much of each, you know, how much money goes in each of 47 buckets. That's really kind of what they're like. So that might have been a little too much democracy. I'm just saying. The participation was important. The ability to get to a decision, not so forthcoming. So they decided that what they needed was a suggestion of how it could be allocated, and then they would react to the suggestion. So that kind of collaboration among and between our government, the City of LA government, you have to design in a way so that people feel that what they're doing is worthwhile and that what they're doing really is worthwhile. Sometimes separation is good because just like with jurisdictions, people have responsibilities. You want them to take their responsibilities in their department. You want the planning department to plan. You want animal care and control department to be the one in charge of animal care and control. You want the fire department to put out the fires. That kind of separation can be a good thing. But when they're separated and there's no interface, for instance, fire department's not just about putting out fires, they're also the paramedics. Paramedics have to somehow interface with the health system. So that separation would not be a good thing. In the same way, collaboration, as I said, can be good or bad. We're collaborating with the city of LA about homeless services, but some collaborations where they kind of like, let's just get everybody in the room to discuss it, can be less helpful. We're starting, for instance, a new green utility, and the county is going to be the one who starts it up. It's called community choice aggregation. Community choice aggregation, what is aggregated in community choice aggregation is the energy. I'll take some wind energy, now I'll take some solar energy, I'll take some maybe renewable natural gas energy, and we will then aggregate it. And this is going to happen, actually, not if you live in the city of LA, because you already have a utility in the city of LA, and they can't participate. But if you live in other cities, they have the opportunity to join the community choice aggregation with us. And that will be the kind of collaboration that can be very good. Each city that joins will have one member on the board that decides what the rates will be, what the green mix will be for energy, and that, oh dear, that's a whole new jurisdiction. Because I haven't even talked about the districts, the Metropolitan Water District, the MTA as we used to call it, which is now called the Metro. All the water districts that provide water to you. These are separate, not to mention the mosquito abatement districts and lots of other kinds of districts that also overlap. So how do you know who to call? What the county has done in trying to do this is to create 211. So you just call 211 and they try to get you to whatever you need, whether it's emergent or not emergent. I have bees in my chimney, I just fell down the stairs, you know what I mean? Whatever it is, so that there would be a doorway. And that, is a way of trying to collaborate by drawing in all of the requests and then getting them to the right place. My district offices essentially do the same thing. So what I've told you is descriptive, not really about a solution for it. I think the hallmark of the county government that I'm in at the moment is collaboration, is trying to break down silos, is getting people to cooperate with each other in order to give you whole person care. And I don't mean just in the health arena. But I have to say, in terms of how I started this out, about art removing boundaries and politicians loving lines, you have probably also heard people refer to the art of politics. And I think that it isn't just lines that we love. Sometimes we love breaking through lines. It isn't just politics that we love. To me, politics is what I do when I'm running for office. Policy is really what I do when I'm in office. And to sort of wrap up with this theme of art, I have to say I love being in the legislature, and I thank all of you that helped me get there from '94 to 2008. But this is the best job I've ever had. And I'll tell you why. Because it's 5 people. Now, Zev used to say, they're all kings and queens, and it's the worst form of government unless you're one of the kings or queens. And to some extent, he was right, which is why you want to be very careful who you elect for stuff. Because those people are going to do what they think is right, and they're not going to ask you every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, well, do you think I ought to vote for this, or do you think I ought to vote for that? And even when they tell you what they voted for, There's only going to be one or two things you really judge them on. Not the 72 that I do every Tuesday at the board meeting or more. That doesn't count closed session. So I think that the answer to a good government where you have these kinds of conflicts is more communication, more collaboration. It sounds like a mantra, but if you make it happen, it can happen. When I invite people to my office, they say yes. So that's a very good thing. I met for an hour and a half with Jerry Brown when I went up to Sacramento. I don't even know the governor. But I asked for the meeting, and he was very kind to give it. And those of you who know me will know why this is a joke. But after almost an hour and a half talking about everything else, I got up to leave, and he said, "Oh, I bet you can tell me about single payer." And of course, the reason is I carried the single payer bill for 6 years, and I could tell him everything about single payer. So it was another half hour. But you have access, and that is the other importance, I think, of representation. I mean, my representation for you, it's another way of coloring within the lines. You are either in the 3rd district or you're not. I'm your representative if you're in the 3rd district, but I don't look at it that way. I have people call me every day going, "I don't like my supervisor, and I'd like it to be you." So I say, "Okay, what do you need?" And we try to do our best, but of course, I try to engage that person's supervisor because they probably don't have the right idea about how wonderful their supervisor is as well. So I would just say to you, I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to your questions and any answers I might have if I have them. And as I said, you don't have to limit yourself, but I hope that as you talk to people about government, that you can help them understand that it is probably one of the very, very best ways to have people who are not able to help themselves get some help. Maybe that's why other people don't like it. But one of the things that I think led to the last election, the election for president, was a growing and I think generated distrust for government. To make people believe that government is bad. Why? Because government is regulation. And if you want unfettered access, you want to be as polluting as you can possibly be, or, I don't know, as rich as you can possibly be, then you don't want a whole lot of government. And except, of course, for other people's lives that are not you, or other people's bodies, for instance. Government is really just a kind of a construct. It's a bunch of empty chairs, just like this room was before you all came in here. What is this room? What's the character of this room? It doesn't have any character. It's a bunch of empty chairs. The character comes from the people who sit in the chairs. And that's the same with government. It's a bunch of empty chairs. And it has character because of the people you put in the chairs. So my deepest gratitude to you for helping me be in one of those chairs. Thank you. So I think we're in a Q&A situation here. If I don't know if you collected any of those nice cards. If anybody wrote in their cards, hold up your cards. Does that say agree or don't agree? Oh, it's not that kind of a meeting. I'm sorry.
We'll gather the cards, and while we do, we've actually gotten a couple of questions ahead of time.
Okay.
We can read off one of you.
I'd be very happy to try to answer questions that you read off. Feels like a kind of a game on television, doesn't it? Okay, give me the question.
The first one, and this is just sort of a general question that may be reflected in several of the other questions we get, is what can the county do to backfill for some of the risks that we're seeing from the federal government?
Nothing. I think you have to face it. The county has $30 billion. The $30 billion is spent either as the federal government tells us to spend it, because it's a pass-through. Say 2/3 of the money does not come from your property taxes and go to the county. The same with the state. The state gets less money, the feds give less money, the county is going to have to cut its services. You can't backfill out of a budget that is allocated. I'm just going to say. So the important thing, I think, is to keep up a kind of drumbeat. It was very interesting to me when we saw the stopgap measure, the stopgap funding measure. Remember, there were a lot of threats to cut the arts to ribbons. There was not going to be a National Endowment of the Arts. Suddenly, we find that the National Endowment for the Arts got $2 million more in the stopgap budget than it did the year before. Now, part of that is because the National Endowment for the Arts got very smart and decided that some of what they wanted to allocate would be therapeutic art for veterans. Oh, we like veterans, so we guess the NEA is not so bad. I mean, if you're a dumb person that thinks that the NEA was bad. And that, I think, is what we have to do and what the county is going to have to do. I'm going to tell you about Operation Monkey Wrench. Operation Monkey Wrench has 3 parts, and I encourage you to join, though there's nothing to join. It's just to be. The first thing is to keep on keeping on. Whatever good you were doing, whatever funds you were raising, whatever volunteering you were doing, whatever nonprofit you were running, whatever good you were doing, keep on doing it. Because what happens in a time that is difficult for people is that they lose heart. And frankly, the people who don't want you to do that good hope that you will lose heart. And it's one of the reasons that you see the kind of, what shall I say, meanness, that would be a nice word for it, to help you think that what you're doing is useless, and so you stop doing it. So the Operation Monkey Wrench says, do not stop doing whatever you're doing that is good. The second part of Operation Monkey Wrench is the monkey wrench part. And that is whatever you can do to stop what the federal government is doing, I don't care how little or how big, do it. In your own arena, in your own area. I am not encouraging you not to pay your taxes. Did you hear that, FBI new guy? Whoever you are. However, I am saying that perhaps you want to do everything you can to pay as little tax as you possibly can, because some people do that and some people don't, and I think that might not be a bad thing right now for all of us to try to do. But the monkey wrench aspect, you will find it if you look for it. There are things that the federal government wants to do. You might just push back with a phone call. You might just push back with a contribution. You might push back with something that tries to keep them from doing something that you don't like. The third part of Operation Monkey Wrench is a little more controversial, and I apologize to those of you who think I'm a really nice person. The New York Times quoted me in the third part of the Monkey Wrench, Operation Monkey Wrench, as encouraging people to lie, cheat, and steal. And I could not deny that I had actually said, the third part is lie, cheat, and steal if you have to. What I'm saying is if you are engaged in any enterprise, whether it's an academic one or a nonprofit one or a for-profit one, you should keep applying for those federal funds and just tell them you're going to do what they want you to do with it. And then just do whatever you want. But tell them that you did what they want you to do. You can find a way to do that. I'll give you an example, for instance. When we started the Sojourn Shelter for Battered Women and Their Children in the late 70s, all of the federal money was for women who had suffered battering. Then they decided, well, we want all the money to go for children instead. So suddenly, what do we do in the Sojourn Shelter for Battered Women? My God, we've got a huge children's program. And we apply for the children's money. Now, it is true that women brought their children. And frankly, it was a good thing because we didn't even have separate programs for the children. So we designed them, but we did not let that money lie fallow. We went after it. And I think that's also a good thing to do.
We've got a couple of questions about the structure of local government. And the first question is just with regard to the county. Should the Board of Supervisors be expanded?
Board of Supervisors should not be expanded. Certainly not in the way the bill is framed. Let me ask you a question. Do you think it's fair if you were going to vote on the government of San Diego County? How the government of San Diego County is structured? Just San Diego County. Should you have a vote for that? Should everybody else in the state have a vote for that? Okay, the bill that Tony Mendoza has put up in the legislature is to give everyone in the state a vote on the structure of LA County, only LA County, no other county, LA County government. Tony's looking for a job, I'm just going to say. Also, I think it's a little bit ironic that once you have 4 women on the board, the centrist men, and they are all men putting this bill in, except for one woman from Stockton. And the board, perhaps they think is a little too progressive, and therefore needs a couple of centrists on it, because it's only the centrist legislators that are on this bill. I say nothing wrong about centrists. They're very, sometimes peacemakers, sometimes find a way to bring people together, but essentially they are not progressive. And in my district, in the 3rd district, for instance, I was told specifically by my voters who know very well who I am, we kind of like a progressive approach. We like poor people to maybe be taken care of. We like homeless people to maybe get a place to sleep. You know, we're for it, second chances.
The second question about the structure of government is, do you see any likelihood of a city-county merger? And if so, do you support or oppose it?
Do you mean the city of LA or the other 88 cities in the county?
City of LA.
Oh.
Sorry. It says City of LA on the card.
I don't think there'd be a city-county merger because the county is more like a state. And to absorb a city government, I think would probably be a disservice to the people of the city of LA, where they have 13, 15, how many representatives?
15 city council?
City council. 15. Representatives to, represent on a much more local level and to be responsible for the kinds of things that cities do. We do pretty well in the unincorporated areas as a city government. We could do it, but I think it would be a disservice to the people who live in the city of LA. Now, were the city of LA to vote to do that, we would certainly accept the results. But personally, I don't think it would be a great service to the people in the city of LA.
There's a bunch of people who were intrigued by the idea of breaking down silos, and so there's a general question about what sort of tricks you use to do that, and maybe you could particularly instantiate that in the context of one of the most complex interjurisdictional issues, which involves the environment and thinking about ways in which different levels of government can sort of form organizations organizations and coalitions to liaise between different levels of monitoring of environmental hazards, so that it's more clear to people who's minding the store on particular issues.
I think it's very difficult to break down silos between and among the various levels of government. The areas that we've been most successful at are the more horizontal silos. I guess there's not a horizontal silo, but a horizontal set of silos. So that in the county itself, we can break down these walls. Between the cities and the county, we can break down these walls. In terms of the state, they are not, they don't get an A for how they play in the sandbox. The Department of Toxics, for instance, does not care whether we take a more stringent view of, let's say, Aliso Canyon. We have been required to put our own money, that is your money, into cleaning up the Exide spill because the state did not for quite a while take that seriously. However, my colleague, Supervisor Solis, I have to say, marched up to Sacramento because she's taller than me, but, you know, formidable, not real tall. And she said, Excide's in my district. Children are very sick. Families are getting sick and dying. We need your help. And so that worked. The state government decided they wanted to invest in cleaning up Exide. They may even think that they're going to put a little money into Aliso Canyon. And the way, I guess, to break down silos and the way we do it, the trick, personal relationships. And I don't mean old friendships. I mean face-to-face. Same way I try to get your vote, you know, face-to-face. I try not to be faceless. I don't think of you as faceless. So I think the trick is quite old-fashioned, person to person. Thanks.
There are a number of questions about specific issues, so maybe we can just try to get through a few of them here.
Sure.
County voters passed Measure H, which you talked about, to move us towards the eradication of homelessness in the region. But of course, contained in the language wasn't actually a magic spell to do it. And so the question is, how will we move forward with that mandate to ensure that Measure H will actually move towards a solution to this terrible problem?
Well, it's a little known fact. We actually called Harry Potter and said, is there a magic spell? He turned to Hermione, of course, because she was the smart one. Let me explain the difference between Measure H and Measure H. Measure H passed by the City of Los Angeles is to build housing. It's only bricks and mortar. That's all it can be for. Measure H that you voted for in the county, or many of you voted for, I don't want to take you for granted, is for services. Wraparound services for people that we put into housing. Housing first. Put a person in housing. You can deliver mental health services a lot better in somebody's studio than on the curb. And, you know, you feel a lot healthier when women are wearing keys around their neck to show how happy they are to have a door to close and lock, and one that they can come back to and it's theirs. They unlock it and they go in. Things we take for granted are very magical. So I think the major problem with homelessness is not getting this 47,000 people off the street. That is a major job. The bigger part, though, is the 13,000 people that are falling into homelessness every month because of the rents in LA County. Richard Bloom brought a bill. He represents some of you on the west side in the assembly, brought a bill to do away with Costa-Hawkins. Costa-Hawkins was, in my opinion, a bad law that I voted against when I was there, that does not allow you to keep rent control. Even if your city, you voted for it in your city, you can't keep rent control during a vacancy. So somebody leaves, somebody dies, somebody's gone, the landlord raises it to market rate. There's nothing against that. So there's another unit off the market or on the market that's not affordable. So what we're trying to do is not only provide services to those who are homeless, but to provide services to try to keep people in their homes. Part of this money will go for eviction defense because people can be evicted and they shouldn't be legally, but they don't have any defense. So we're going to put a little money into eviction defense. Boom, 13,000 people that won't fall into homelessness because we provided eviction defense. So the problem is it's kind of like somebody dumped a whole bag of marbles on the table and we're running around trying to keep them from rolling off all four sides. But I guarantee we are running around trying to keep them from rolling off. I don't know whether there's a specific question about how we're going to use Measure H funding, but it is for services, mental health services, finding a job, training for a job, addiction recovery services, little stuff, financial empowerment services, people who've never had a checking account, don't know how to write a check, want to go for a job interview, have never gone. We're buying people alarm clocks because they've never had an actual job, but they want to have one. So you teach them, set the alarm clock, it wakes you up, you should get to work on time. This seems like it's obvious to you. You'd be amazed how many foster kids don't know because who's going to tell them? I mean, really. So a lot of the services really are mental health, substance abuse treatment, physical health. But a lot of it goes beyond that, to prepare people to be independent.
There's a few questions related to criminal justice. One asks how we can improve the county jails, and another asks for your thoughts on the sort of size and distribution of law enforcement and whether that's appropriate for the sort of policing needs that we have in Los Angeles.
The size and distribution of the number of officers?
That's right, yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, the first thing about the jail, there's a lot of conflict, obviously, about jails, and we probably would have a robust discussion here in this room. One of the things that I did 2 years ago, when we were considering a motion to tear down Men's Central, which is a pit. I mean, don't go there. Or go there, because it is an education, just like walking down Skid Row. To tear down Men's Central and build a treatment facility, a penal treatment facility for people who are incarcerated, but mentally ill mostly. This is going to be a facility for people, and it's a huge percentage of our population in jail, both at Men's Central and at Twin Towers, who have mental illness. It was going to be as big as Men's Central, which is thousands of beds. They call them beds, they're really cells, but they call them beds. So I brought a motion to cut it down by 1,000, just to make the jail smaller. Why? Because they'll fill it up. It'll be full. And it doesn't need to be. So we took a bunch of the money and we put it into a new Office of Diversion and Reentry. Diversion is what you do with someone when you know giving them mental health treatment in the jail is not the best setting. However, they must be in custody. So we're developing a whole cadre of other services. People are in custody. It's not a country club, but to get treatment. Because if you get treatment to people with mental illness who've been arrested, they will be able to stay out of trouble. If you don't, they'll just be back and back and back. In terms of the size of the force, I don't have an opinion about LAPD. That's not our police force. I believe the sheriff is having trouble filling all the empty slots because they can't find enough candidates that fulfill the requirements. But they will no longer actually be policing on the metro. So we're thinking maybe it will be right-sized, but of course Jim McDonald doesn't agree. He thinks it should be bigger. So that's part of the struggle too. But I don't have an opinion that something should be smaller just because it's law enforcement. We're trying to right-size as we can. I can tell you there are not enough deputies now. There's a huge number of unfilled slots because people are simply not applying, not testing well, not able to be deputies.
So there are a few questions on topics that are near and dear to the hearts of people around here. One of them asks, which of the proposed Measure M projects do you think is the most important for the region? And the second, in this sort of vein, is are pension obligations of California public employees sustainable?
I don't know about California public employees because that's not my jurisdiction. However, I will tell you the county is 87% funded. So don't think we've got a pension problem. We don't. And it really counts. It's because of putting money in all along. Where we do have a problem is in our health care for retirees. And we put about $200 million a year into that. But, you know, we're all living a little bit longer. And so the obligations go up. As to Measure M, when you say our region, I'm assuming you don't mean my region in the valley as well, because that's a whole different area of my district. Talking about the west side, okay, purple line, purple line, purple line. The purple line is almost finished. You've probably been reading about it going to LACMA because they keep finding bones in the tar pits. You know, you've seen that boring machine that's like as big as a whole tunnel? Well, imagine going through there and having to stop every 5 seconds because you found a bone. Only it's not this. It was a mastodon head. It was so amazing. It's just so cool. Okay, so the Purple Line, phase one of the new part of the Purple Line will go to LACMA, and it will open, not sure, next year. The next phase goes from LACMA to Century City, through Beverly Hills with a stop at Rodeo Drive. I know you love it, right? Get off of Rodeo Drive and window shop. That's what I do. I can't buy anything. But the third part of it will go from Century City to the VA. So right by here. And I hope that we get the Olympics, personally, and that means if we get the Olympics, we're going to finish the whole thing by 2024. It's going to be one of those, okay, when you watch the film of people, building stuff or whatever. I think it's going to kind of look like that, actually. But I'm really, really excited about it. Now, I am still, you know how that in Up, where the dogs go, squirrel, squirrel? Okay, that's how I am about trains. The Expo line goes right through Santa Monica now, and it's still kind of new. And everybody else, I'm sure, is in their car going, that damn train, when is it going to go through? And I'm going like, oh my God, look at that train. Train, oh, it's a train. I mean, I'm like 3 years old, I have to say. So I love Measure M. I love being on the Metro Board, and I love what we've done in LA. I see some people that might even be old enough to remember the streetcars, the red cars. I rode the streetcar, I grew up over by the Coliseum. I rode the number 5 car downtown to see where all the movies were. That's where the first run movies were at that time. And, it's like waiting a lifetime for there to be trains again. And now there are trains. Train.
The Expo line is great. So let's maybe just have one more question, and this will sort of harken back to something you touched on at the end, and maybe more in your previous role when you focused on these things. But what's the best path forward in California for single-payer healthcare? And I guess maybe more generally, how do you think about healthcare and where we're headed?
The best path forward for single-payer in California, Donald Trump. I just hope he keeps saying he hates it. I mean, really, the more you take away what people have, the more they will want to think about a new model that actually works for them. Let me tell you very briefly about what single payer is. How many people here are on Medicare? Okay, single payer is Medicare for everybody in California. Not a federal program, but a state program, where everybody pays in, because we all do. We still, if we're earning, we pay Social Security, we pay Medicare, and that is what supports it. Of course, it's all those nice young people putting it in and not taking it out. But when we had a study for the single-payer bill, and I got it through both houses twice and on the governor's desk twice, when we did a study for it, it showed that it would be a little bit less than the premiums you're paying or that your employer is paying if you're not on Medicare. For this audience, it's hard to remember, I guess, when we were paying premiums, right? But no offense, I'm 76, so I'm older than half of you, or more. And so single payer, I think, looks better than it ever did. The interesting thing to me is, when the ACA was voted in, 60 people lost their seats, 60 Democrats lost their seats in Congress because they had voted for the ACA. Now, it's possible that 40 will lose their seats because they voted against the ACA. Something's wrong with the American people. I don't know. It's like, I don't like it. Now I like it. Now I've got it. I want to keep it. I didn't have it. I didn't know. So the lesson is we have to pay attention. When you hear about single payer, let it in for a minute about what it really is. When people say, how will we pay for it? Think about the aggregate of all of the premiums being paid in California right now. It would take the place of private health insurance and make, like Medicare, a public health insurance program that would take in the money and pay out the money. And it would work just like Medicare, and I think better. Many hospitals right now prefer Medicare to private insurance because private insurance is not paying very fast. They contest a lot more than Medicare. So I think single payer has a real shot now. This governor is not in favor. I tried to explain how it would be paid for. He still has his doubts, but maybe we'll get it. There are others who want to not only hold on to the ACA, but make certain that we expand it in California, because people say, you know, I understand that, I know what that is. If you expand it, I might feel good. I don't want something so radical, you know, as single payer. But those of you who would like single payer, I would say, you know, keep pushing at it, keep educating yourself, find a friend and see if you can tell them and explain it to them. It's good practice, I'd say. But I think that was the last question. I am very, very happy to have been here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor. As I mentioned before, there is a reception just outside, and I also want to encourage you, if you enjoyed tonight's program, to support the lecture fund. And there's cards, I think, in the front to help you to do that. And also you can visit our website at www.polysci.ucla.edu and help support the fund. So we appreciate you being here, and please join us for the reception. Thank you.